As the WNBA moves closer to one of its most important business moments in years, Charles Barkley has stepped into the conversation with a warning that is already getting attention across the basketball world. With the next collective bargaining agreement hanging in the balance and the March 10 negotiation deadline putting pressure on both sides, Barkley offered a blunt reminder to WNBA players, including Caitlin Clark, about how these labor battles usually play out when owners and players are fighting over money, power, and the future of the league. Barkley shared his thoughts during a recent episode of the Steam Room podcast with Ernie Johnson, and in typical Charles Barkley fashion, he did not soften the message. He made it clear that when negotiations reach this level, emotions, public support, and social media opinions only go so far. In his view, the reality is much simpler and much tougher than many people want to admit. The people who control the money usually control the leverage, and that is the part of the conversation he thinks many people are overlooking as the WNBA and the Players Union push toward a new deal. His comments come at a time when the pressure around the WNBA collective bargaining agreement is clearly building. The league and the players are facing serious questions about revenue sharing, financial security, and what a fair long-term structure should look like as the WNBA continues to grow in visibility, popularity, and commercial value. This is not just another routine labor discussion. It is a major turning point for the league, especially now that women's basketball is getting more attention than ever and players are increasingly vocal about what they believe they deserve from that growth. Barkley began by taking aim at the way the entire issue has been discussed publicly. He sounded frustrated by the flood of outside commentary, especially from people who, in his view, are too quick to speak confidently about a complicated negotiation without understanding how the business side really works. But even after pushing back on the noise surrounding the debate, he still chose to address the players directly, and that is where his message became especially sharp. One of the biggest points Barkley made was about the WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert and the role she plays in this process. He said very directly that the commissioner works for the owners. That comment was not framed as a personal attack on Engelbert. In fact, Barkley made it clear that he likes her, but what he wanted to emphasize was that players should not misunderstand where the commissioner's loyalties have to be during negotiations like this. From Barkley's perspective, the commissioner is not there to act as an independent friend to the players. She is there to represent ownership interests because that is the structure of professional sports. That may sound obvious to some people, but Barkley seemed to believe it needed to be said out loud. As the debate around the WNBA's next collective bargaining agreement has intensified, there has been a growing sense in some corners that the players may have strong momentum on their side. They have public support, they have star power, and they have increasing visibility. There is also broader excitement around the league's future, especially with names like Caitlin Clark helping drive interest. But Barkley's warning was essentially this: none of that changes the basic power structure if ownership decides to push back hard. That is why one of his most memorable lines from the podcast instantly stood out. Barkley said players had better be careful because the people with the money hold the power. It was harsh, but it was also clearly meant as a reality check. He was not saying players should stay quiet or stop fighting for what they believe is fair. He was saying they need to fully understand what kind of battle this is before assuming public support alone will tip the scales in their favor. And that is where this gets especially interesting. Barkley made it clear that he supports women's basketball and wants the WNBA to keep growing. He was not trying to tear the league down or dismiss what the players are asking for. If anything, his comments sounded like the warning of someone who has seen these battles before and knows how ugly they can become once labor talks turn into full-scale standoffs. His tone was tough, but underneath it was a clear message that professional sports negotiations are rarely emotional arguments. They are business fights, and in business fights, leverage matters more than sympathy. To drive that point home, Barkley pointed back to NBA history, and that context matters. He reminded listeners that even some of the biggest legends in basketball were not able to overpower ownership during labor disputes. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan were three of the most important players the game has ever seen. They were global stars, league icons, and the faces of entire eras. And yet, when lockouts happened, even those names did not have the power to simply force ownership into submission. That historical perspective is central to Barkley's thinking.
He mentioned the 1995 NBA lockout, which ran from July 1st to September 13th and disrupted the normal flow of the off-season, training camp, and preseason preparations. At that point, Jordan was still active, while Bird and Magic had already retired, but the larger lesson remained the same. Even with enormous star power in the league, ownership was still prepared to dig in and let things stop if they believed that was the best way to protect their position. Then came the even more damaging 1998-99 lockout, which dragged on for 204 days and wiped out 464 regular season games. That was not a minor inconvenience. That was a huge disruption that changed the season, hurt momentum, and showed just how far league ownership was willing to go in a labor standoff. By then, Jordan had just stepped away after the 1998 finals, while Bird and Magic had long since stopped playing. But Barkley's point was not about the exact status of each player, it was about the pattern. Again and again, ownership had shown that it was willing to shut things down if negotiations became a serious battle over money and structure. He also pointed to labor tension from even earlier periods, including the early 1980s, when intense bargaining fights and strike threats helped shape the 1983 collective bargaining agreement. In Barkley's view, these moments all lead back to the same uncomfortable truth. Players may be the stars, they may drive the product on the floor, and they may have public sympathy, but ownership groups have traditionally held the financial leverage when labor disputes become serious. That history is the foundation of his warning to WNBA players now.
And the timing of his comments could not be more important. The WNBA and the Players Union are currently trying to work through major differences before the new season arrives. According to reporting from ESPN, the league sent a counter-proposal to the union just one day after receiving the players' offer. That quick response suggests both urgency and tension. It shows that this is not a slow-moving process happening quietly in the background. Both sides know the stakes, and both sides are actively trying to shape the outcome before the deadline forces a more dramatic moment. While many of the details remain private, one issue has clearly emerged as the center of the debate: revenue sharing. That has become the headline issue in these talks, and it helps explain why the atmosphere is so serious. The Players Union has reportedly asked for an average of 26% of gross league revenue, including 25% in the first year of a new agreement. That is a major request, and it reflects the growing confidence among players that the WNBA's rising value should lead to a significantly better financial arrangement for those on the court. League executives, however, have reportedly pushed back on that figure and described it as unrealistic. Instead, the league has proposed a model that would distribute more than 70% of net revenue as the WNBA continues to expand. That difference between gross revenue and net revenue is not a small technical detail. It goes right to the heart of how both sides define fairness, sustainability, and the league's long-term financial future. And that is why these negotiations are so difficult. Both sides can claim they are thinking about growth, but they are measuring that growth in very different ways. Into that debate steps Caitlin Clark, one of the biggest stars in the sport and one of the most important public voices in women's basketball right now. Clark has not tried to turn this into a war of public soundbites. Instead, she has called for a more direct, face-to-face approach. She said she does not understand why the two sides cannot just get into a room, iron things out, shake hands, and work toward a solution with mutual respect. That comment stands out because it reflects a more straightforward view of how business should be handled. Clark is essentially calling for real conversation instead of a long-distance exchange of proposals. Her position also matters because she represents a major part of the WNBA's current momentum. Clark's arrival in the league brought massive attention, more media coverage, and a surge of fan interest. So when she speaks about labor negotiations, people listen. At the same time, her words suggest that she would rather see the process move toward collaboration than drag further into a public battle. That does not mean the issues are simple, and it certainly does not mean a handshake alone can solve something this complicated. But it does show that at least some players want a more direct and respectful path to an agreement. That brings the WNBA to a critical point. The league is growing, the players are pushing for a bigger share of that growth, and ownership is clearly trying to protect its own financial model as the business evolves.
Add a firm deadline, high-profile commentary from someone like Charles Barkley, and the influence of a star like Caitlin Clark, and suddenly these negotiations feel much bigger than a typical labor story. This has become a defining moment for the future direction of the WNBA. What makes Barkley's comments so compelling is that they cut right through the optimism and go straight to the hard part. It's easy to talk about momentum, support, and rising popularity. It's much harder to confront the reality that professional sports labor disputes often come down to who can afford to wait longer and who has the stronger position when talks become tense. Barkley has seen enough of these battles to know that good intentions don't always determine the outcome. That does not mean the players cannot make progress. It does not mean the union's demands are wrong. And it does not mean ownership will automatically get everything it wants. What it means is that this is a genuine power struggle, and those almost never get resolved cleanly or quickly. The WNBA is no longer operating in the shadows. The spotlight is brighter now, and that makes every move, every quote, and every proposal feel more significant. As the March 10th deadline approaches, the pressure is only going to grow. The players want a deal that reflects the value they believe they are creating. The league wants a structure it believes is realistic and sustainable. Public attention is rising, and the stakes are becoming clearer by the day. Whether this ends in compromise, tension, or a more dramatic confrontation, one thing is certain: this is one of the most important business battles the WNBA has faced in years. And in the middle of it all, Charles Barkley's message hangs over the conversation. It wasn't polished and it wasn't gentle, but it was unmistakably direct. He wants players to remember that support and popularity don't erase the realities of ownership power. In his view, the money side of sports has always shaped these fights, and unless both sides can find real common ground soon, this negotiation could become much tougher than many people expect. That is why the next few days matter so much. The WNBA is standing at a major crossroads, and what happens now could shape not only the upcoming season, but also the league's long-term relationship with its players. The stars are speaking up, the union is pushing, ownership is responding, and the basketball world is watching closely. For all the excitement around the league's growth, this moment is a reminder that growth also brings pressure, and pressure forces everyone to reveal what they are really willing to fight for.